It was 6:52 a.m. on a rain-lashed Tuesday when the world decided to test Camille Johnson's last nerve. The storm hadn't broken, it had simply settled over Atlanta, turning the cracked pavement outside the corner store into a murky river. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and wet concrete. Camille wrestled two overstuffed grocery bags through the sliding doors, her muscles screaming from the double shift she'd finished just 6 hours ago. Her triplets, Marcus, Maya, and Jordan, tugged at her raincoat, a whirlwind of four-year-old energy. "Stay close, babies," she warned, her voice raspy with a fatigue that went straight to the bone. But Marcus, the most curious, always saw the world differently. His eyes, sharp and observant, caught a glint of black leather near the parking lot's edge. A sleek, masculine wallet, thick with the promise of money and power. His small fingers darted out before Camille could stop him. "Mommy, look a wallet, P." Camille's stomach plummeted. "Lord, not today." Before she could snatch it, a shadow fell over them. A tall figure cut across the wet lot, his stride sharp and purposeful. His suit was a perfect stormy gray, tailored to broad shoulders, his shoes gleaming like obsidian mirrors against the dull concrete. He moved with an authority that made the very air part around him. "Who touched my wallet?" The man's voice cracked through the damp morning like a whip. Shoppers froze. The triplets huddled closer to Camille's legs. Her spine stiffened as his gaze landed on her. Hard, dark, and utterly merciless. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, pushing Marcus's hand down. "My son just found it. You expect me to believe a child just happened to pick up a wallet containing $10,000? His tone dripped with a contempt so cold it felt like a physical blow. "People don't return things like this. They steal." Heat flared in Camille's chest. The humiliation was a familiar sting. She knew exactly what he saw. A young, broke black woman with 3 kids clinging to her, standing under the harsh, flickering glow of a faulty street lamp. An easy target. An easy accusation. "You got a lot of nerve," Camille snapped, raising her chin. "My children don't steal. They got more honesty in their little fingers than you got in your whole rich body." A ripple of murmurs went through the small crowd of onlookers. The man's eyes narrowed, but something flickered in their dark depths when he looked down at the triplets. Marcus clutched the wallet stubbornly. Maya's tiny fists were balled on her hips, her curls bouncing as she frowned up at him, utterly fearless. Jordan simply tilted his head, studying the stranger's face with an odd, piercing curiosity. For the first time, the man hesitated. His jaw tightened. His gaze lingered on their faces, tracing the lines of their features, as if searching for a ghost. "Give it back, Mommy," Marcus said softly, breaking the silence. "It's his daddy's wallet." The word cut the air in two. Daddy. Camille's breath caught in her throat. The billionaire's head snapped toward her, his eyes burning like hot coals. Something dangerous flashed there, not just suspicion, but a dawning, horrifying recognition. He took the wallet slowly, deliberately, his long fingers brushing against Marcus's small hand. For just a second, his expression cracked the mask of polished steel, slipping to reveal something raw and unsettled beneath. "Who are you?" His voice was low now, a gravelly growl meant only for her. Camille pulled her kids close, a fire blazing in her chest, even as fear twisted her gut. "I'm the mother of these children," she spat. "That's all you need to know. Now get out of our way." She shoved past him, the triplets in tow, but she felt his gaze burning into her back like a brand long after she turned the corner. Damian Blackwell stood motionless in the rain. He pulled out his phone, his eyes never leaving the spot where she'd disappeared. "Follow her," he told his security chief, his voice dangerously calm. "Name, address, job. I want everything." He slid the wallet back into his pocket, but his hands trembled ever so slightly. Those children, their eyes, their faces. It couldn't be. But the coincidence was too staggering. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It was a constant drumming presence against the windows of Camille's small apartment, a gray curtain that matched the storm brewing inside her. She sat at her kitchen table, a chipped mug of cold coffee in her hands, staring at the wall clock. Each tick was a hammer blow to her composure. 48 hours. The nurse's promise echoed in her mind, a countdown to a future she could no longer control. Across the city, in a penthouse that seemed to float above the clouds, Damian Blackwell stared out at the same rain-smeared skyline. A single untouched glass of whiskey sat on his desk. The report from his head of security, Harris, lay open before him. Camille Johnson, 24. Works double shifts at the Sunrise Diner. Clean record, no priors. She's poor, sir. Barely surviving. The words, "but she's respected" from Harris had stuck in his mind an irritating burr under his skin. He dismissed the man with a curt order. Schedule a paternity test. Quietly, no headlines. 2 days later, the storm inside Camille broke in a way she never expected. The diner, usually her sanctuary of clattering plates and familiar banter, was silent when she arrived for her evening shift. Whispers followed her to the back, where the manager, a man named Frank who'd once given Jordan a free cookie, couldn't meet her eyes. "Camille, I'm sorry. With all this attention, the owner says you're bad for business. We have to let you go." Her face flushed with a heat that had nothing to do with the kitchen. What attention? What are people saying? The answer was waiting for her outside, splashed across a gossip blog on her phone. Billionaire's baby mama drama. Grainy photos of her children, of her apartment building. The world tilted. Her paycheck, her kids' food, her fragile stability, all gone in an instant. And then, as if summoned by her despair, the sleek black car pulled to the curb. The window slid down silently, revealing Damian's impassive face. "Get in." Her fist clenched. "You did this." "I protected you," he countered, his voice cold steel. "If I hadn't buried worse rumors, you'd be on the front page of every paper in the city by now. You think ruining my life gives you the right to own me?" She spat, her voice trembling with a rage so pure it scared her. He leaned back, studying her with that infuriating calm. "Not own, but if those children are mine," he said, each word deliberate and heavy, "then so are you." The truth of it was a claw in her chest. What if he was right? With a sharp, defeated inhale, she yanked the car door open and slid inside. The interior was a tomb of leather and silence. "You think you can just bulldoze into my life, take away the only income I had, and then order me around?" Her voice broke not from fear, but from a lifetime of swallowed pride. He turned to her, and the intensity in his eyes made her flinch. "I don't care about your pride. I care about the truth. And until I have it, we'll both be standing in this storm." The car stopped, not at her apartment, but before a sterile, marble-clad medical building glowing under spotlights. "What is this?" she demanded, her heart hammering. "The test," he said, his gaze locking onto hers. Inside the clinic was a world of hushed efficiency. A nurse expecting them ushered the confused triplets through the process with a clinical smile. Sterile cotton swabs labeled vials. To Camille, it felt like her entire existence was being measured, cataloged, and sealed away. On the silent drive back, Damian finally spoke. "If they are mine, everything changes. They'll have the life they deserve. The best schools, the best care. They'll never want for anything again." "And what about me?" Camille's head snapped around. "You made your choices. But if they carry my blood, they're Blackwells, and Blackwells do not live in poverty." "You think money fixes everything," her voice cracked. "You think you can walk in with your millions and erase the years I spent crying myself to sleep, praying I'd have enough for diapers? Those kids don't care about your empire. They care about love, something you clearly don't know how to give." For the first time, his mask slipped. His gaze darkened with something heavier than anger, a profound, lonely ache. "You don't know me," he whispered. "And you don't know them," she fired back, clutching her children as she fled the car, his burning gaze branding her back. The knock came just after sundown on the second day. Heavy, final. Damian stood in her doorway, rain glistening on his immaculate suit, an envelope held by a stone-faced man behind him. "Let me in." Against every screaming instinct, she stepped aside. He stood in the center of her living room, a king in a pauper's court, and tore the envelope open. His eyes scanned the paper. His jaw tightened. His nostrils flared. He looked up, and his gaze was a weapon aimed directly at her heart. 99.9%, they're mine. The room spun. She gripped the table. "You kept my children from me for 4 years," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Kept her fury was a living thing. "You disappeared. You didn't call, you didn't look." I didn't know, the words thundered through the small apartment, making the children in the doorway jump. "If I had known, I never would have," he stopped himself, fists clenched. "Never would have." What she stepped closer, fire in her veins. "Left me alone, pregnant and broke, while you sat in your glass tower, counting billions." He was silent for a long moment, the only sound the relentless rain. "I can't change the past, but I can change now. Those children are Blackwells. From this moment on, they will live like it. You think money makes you a father? Money gives them the safety you can't, the opportunities you never had. His eyes swept the cramped, peeling room. And if you think I'm going to let my heirs grow up in this, you're mistaken. They've had love here, stability, a mother who's been there for every fever, every nightmare. They don't need your penthouse. They need me. Then they'll have both, he said, his voice dropping to a tone that froze her blood. I'm not taking them from you, but I will not be a stranger in their lives. From today, I am their father. The declaration hung in the air, a seismic shift she was powerless to stop. The city never slept, but Damian Blackwell's empire thrived on its constant pulse. That morning, his office tower loomed like a beacon, windows glittering with the promise of power and profit. Inside, Damian sat at the head of a mahogany table, surrounded by board members, lawyers, and investors. It was supposed to be the most important deal of his career, a merger worth billions, a chance to expand his legacy beyond Atlanta, to stamp the Blackwell name across continents. Every eye in the room watched him like a hawk waiting for his command. But Damian wasn't listening. His mind replayed the image of Jordan's tear-streaked face, Marcus's sobs, Maya's trembling voice. He saw Camille crumpling in relief as she clutched their son to her chest. He heard her whisper raw and breaking, "Don't you ever scare mommy like that again." He had never been so afraid, not in hostile takeovers, not in moments when fortunes hung by a thread. Nothing had ever undone him the way nearly losing his son had. And it hit him like a truth too sharp to ignore. All the money in the world meant nothing if he lost them. Mr. Blackwell, a board member, pressed, pulling him back. "Do we move forward with signing?" Damian's gaze dropped to the contracts. The ink was ready. His empire demanded it. But Camille's words from that night echoed in his chest. "They don't need your empire. They need love." He set the pen down. "No," he said simply. The room froze. "Excuse me," one investor stammered. Damian's voice cut through the stunned silence. "This merger would move my attention overseas. It would take me away for months, maybe years. That's not acceptable." "Sir," his CFO said carefully, "we're talking about billions." "I don't care," Damian snapped, his eyes flashing. "This deal is over. Blackwell Corporation stays here." Gasps rippled around the table. The CFO looked pale. "You'll lose investors." "Then let them walk," Damian said coldly. "My family comes first." The words left his mouth before he realized he'd said them out loud. Family. For the first time in years, Damian Blackwell chose something other than power. Camille didn't know about the sacrifice. Not yet. She only knew she was struggling through another sleepless night, torn between gratitude and fear. After the gala incident, the triplets were finally asleep, but her own thoughts wouldn't stop. She sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands, when a knock rattled her door. Her chest clenched. Only one man knocked like that. She opened it to find Damian drenched from the rain. No chauffeur, no guards, just him. Her guards shot up instantly. "What do you want?" He looked at her eyes, dark jaw set. But there was something different in his expression. Less steel, more storm. "I walked away from $1 billion deal today," he said. She blinked, stunned. "What?" "I could have signed," he continued, stepping inside uninvited. "It would have secured Blackwell Corp's future for the next decade. It would have expanded everything I've built, but it would have taken me away. Away from Atlanta, away from them." Her heart stuttered. "And you chose not to." "I chose them," he said simply, his gaze locked on hers. "I chose you." Camille froze. For a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence. She wanted to scoff, to accuse him of exaggeration, but there was no arrogance in his tone, no smugness in his eyes, only raw, unguarded truth. "Why?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "Because I'm done building towers if they leave me empty. I've built an empire, Camille, but none of it means a damn thing without my children. Without," he hesitated, his voice cracking, "without you." Her chest ached. Tears pricked her eyes, but she shook her head, fighting them back. "Don't say that. You don't mean it. I've never meant anything more." Her hands trembled. "You hurt me, Damian. You weren't there when I needed you most. Do you know what it's like to cry yourself to sleep every night, terrified you won't be able to feed your babies?" His voice was rough. "No, I don't. And I can't erase that. But I can give you something else. I can give you the man I should have been then. The father they deserve. The partner you deserve." The word partner made her heart lurch. "Don't," she whispered again, but her voice was weaker now. Don't make promises you can't keep. His eyes burned. I don't break promises. For a long moment they stood in silence, the rain hammering the windows, his presence overwhelming her tiny apartment. Finally she turned away, clutching the edge of the table like a lifeline. You think walking away from a deal makes you a saint? That I'll just fall at your feet because you sacrificed money you already have more than enough of? No, he said quietly. I think it shows you I'm willing to give up anything, everything for you, for them. Her throat tightened. She hated him for saying it, hated him more for the way her heart wanted to believe it. Get out, she whispered, tears streaking her face. But before he left, he stepped close. Close enough that she felt his warmth, smelled the faint trace of whiskey and rain on his skin. You can hate me, Camille, he murmured, but you can't deny this. I'm not leaving again. And whether you fight me or not, I'll prove it to you every day. Then he left the door clicking shut behind him. Camille sank into a chair, shaking, tears dripping onto her hands. She thought of his words, his sacrifice. I chose them. I chose you. And for the first time she wondered if the man she hated might be the same man she once dreamed of loving. The next morning the triplets chatted over breakfast. Daddy said he'll come to my school play. Daddy said he'll take us camping. Daddy said he'll never leave again. Camille stirred their cereal in silence, her chest tight. She looked at their glowing faces, at the hope in their voices, and she realized something terrifying. Damian wasn't just winning them over. He was winning her. Later after breakfast, devolved into sticky syrup-covered chaos, Camille went to wash her hands. Passing by Damian's study, she heard something that made her stop cold. A voice, his voice, low, unsteady. She leaned closer. Through the cracked door, she saw him sitting on the floor in his pressed jeans, surrounded by the triplets. Maya sat cross-legged in front of him, braiding a doll's hair. Marcus fiddled with toy cars. Jordan sat on Damian's lap, holding a book. Damian's head was bent low, his usually commanding tone softened into something fragile. When I was your age, he said slowly, I didn't have a mommy like yours or even a daddy who cared. My father, he only wanted me to be strong. He never told me bedtime stories. He never hugged me. He never... His voice cracked and he stopped. The children were watching him with wide eyes. Camille's breath caught in her chest. Jordan touched his cheek gently. But you hug us, Daddy. Damian's throat worked, his voice a whisper. Yes, I'll always hug you. I'll always be here. I'll never be like him. Camille pressed a hand over her mouth, her heart splintering. She had never imagined Damian Blackwell, arrogant, ruthless Damian, speaking like this. Vulnerable, broken. She wanted to turn away to give him privacy, but she couldn't move. She was rooted in place, tears burning her eyes. That evening, when the triplets collapsed into bed after an exhausting day of games, Camille went to the kitchen to fetch water. She nearly collided with Damian. He stood in the doorway, watching her silently. You heard me, he said quietly, not a question. She swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter, he cut in. His voice was low, steady, but his eyes betrayed him. You know now. You know the truth. Her throat tightened. Damian. He stepped closer, shadows curling around him. I never told anyone that. Not even Vanessa. Not even my board. You're the first. Her heart pounded. The weight of his confession pressed against her. For once he wasn't untouchable. He was raw, bare, bleeding. Why me, she whispered. His gaze locked with hers. Because you're the only one who matters. The words stole her breath. Silence stretched heavy, electric. He moved closer until there was barely an inch between them, his heat radiating into her skin. You drive me insane, he murmured, his voice rough. You fight me at every turn. You look at me like I'm a monster. But Camille, you also make me feel alive. You make me want to be a better man. Her body trembled. She wanted to step back to flee, but her feet stayed planted. Damian, this isn't supposed to happen, she whispered. We're supposed to be enemies. His lips curved a ghost of a smile. Then why do you look at me like that? She realized with horror that her eyes had dropped to his mouth. She snapped them back up, cheeks burning. He leaned closer, his voice barely a breath. Tell me you don't feel it, and I'll walk away. Her chest heaved. She opened her mouth, but no words came because she couldn't lie. And he saw it. His hand lifted, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch so gentle it made her knees weaken. Camille, he whispered. Her heart screamed at her to run, but her body leaned closer, just as their lips almost touched. Mommy, Daddy. Maya's voice pierced the air, the sound of small feet pattering down the hall. Camille jerked back like she'd been burned, her hand flying to her chest. Damian's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as he took a step back. By the time Maya ran into the kitchen dragging her doll, both adults were standing apart, pretending nothing had happened. But Camille's pulse refused to slow, and Damian's eyes, even in the dim light, still burned with the truth. The walls between them were breaking. That night, Camille lay awake on the guest bed Damian had offered her. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning. She had seen him with the children, heard him confess his pain, felt the truth in his voice when he said she was the only one who mattered. And though she fought it with every ounce of her strength, her heart whispered the most dangerous thought of all. What if he really had changed? Camille woke the next morning to the sound of laughter. Not her children's usual shrieks, but a deep rumbling sound she had never heard before. Damian. She sat up confused, her heart thudding as she followed the sound down the hallway. She stopped at the open playroom door. There he was, Damian Blackwell, the man who terrified entire boardrooms, sitting cross-legged on the floor in sweatpants, letting Marcus and Jordan climb all over him like he was a jungle gym. Maya sat beside him, braiding his hair with colorful toy clips. And he was laughing, really laughing. The sight pierced Camille's chest. He looked so human. Not the ruthless billionaire, not the arrogant man she had cursed every night for 4 years. Just a father. Just a man. Her throat tightened as she watched him lift Marcus high in the air, spinning him until the boy squealed. "Higher, Daddy! Higher, Daddy!" Jordan echoed, tugging his sleeve. "Me next." Camille's vision blurred. That one word, Daddy, so natural on their lips, hit her harder than any insult, harder than any fight. She turned quickly, afraid he might see the tears threatening to fall, but she wasn't quick enough. Camille, Damian's voice called softly behind her. She froze, then slowly turned. His eyes were on her, his expression unreadable. The children whined when he stood. "Don't go, Daddy. I'll be right back," he promised, his gaze still locked on Camille. Her heart pounded as he crossed the hall toward her. In the quiet of the kitchen, away from little eyes and ears, Camille tried to compose herself. She busied her hands with mugs and the coffee pot, desperate for distraction. "Coffee?" she asked stiffly, her back to him. "I don't want coffee," he said. His voice was low, steady, but charged. She set the pot down, bracing her hands on the counter. "Then what do you want?" There was silence, heavy, then footsteps closing the space between them. She could feel his heat at her back before he even spoke. "You!" Her breath hitched. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Damian, I can't fight it anymore," he interrupted, his voice rough, almost desperate. "I tried. I told myself it was just the children, just responsibility. But every time I see you, every time you walk into a room," his jaw tightened. "You undo me." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Don't what he challenged. "Don't tell you the truth. Don't admit I can't go a single night without thinking of you." He stepped closer, his eyes burning into hers. "I've built empires, Camille. I've won wars in boardrooms. But I'm losing this battle with you. I'm losing, and I don't even care." Her lips parted, but no words came. "I need to know," he said, his voice breaking now. "Do you feel it too, or am I alone in this madness?" Her eyes stung with tears. She wanted to say no, to push him away. She wanted to protect herself from the storm he carried. But she couldn't lie. Not when her body trembled at his nearness. Not when her heart pounded like a drum begging to be heard. "Yes," she whispered, "I feel it." Damian's breath caught for a heartbeat. Silence reigned. Then he closed the distance. His mouth claimed hers in a kiss that was nothing like the firestorm of their first. This one was deeper, slower, filled with years of longing and unspoken words. Camille melted against him before she realized she had moved, her hands gripping his shirt as if to anchor herself. He groaned softly against her lips, pulling her closer, his arms wrapping around her like he'd never let go. Her mind screamed warnings. "He'll break you. He'll ruin you. He's still Damian Blackwell." But her heart drowned it out. For the first time in years, she let herself feel. The kiss deepened, grew urgent. Their bodies pressed flush as if making up for lost time. Camille's knees weakened, but his grip held her firm. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, their foreheads pressed together. "Camille," he whispered, his voice raw. "I've never wanted anyone the way I want you. Not Vanessa, not anyone. Only you." Her eyes searched his, desperate for lies, but all she saw was truth. Terrifying, beautiful truth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You hurt me so much," she whispered. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making it right," he vowed. His thumb brushed her tears away tender, where once he'd been cold. Give me the chance. Her heart ached. Every instinct screamed to resist, but her soul whispered what her lips had already confessed. She felt it too. A sudden giggle shattered the moment. They turned to find Maya standing in the doorway, her doll tucked under her arm. You kissed, she squealed, eyes wide with delight. Mommy and Daddy kissed. Camille's face flushed crimson. Damian straightened his mask, sliding back into place, but not before Camille saw the flicker of a smile tug at his lips. Back to your brothers, Damian said smoothly, though his voice was still husky. We'll be there soon. Maya darted off singing Mommy Loves Daddy down the hall. Camille groaned, covering her face. Oh, God. Damian chuckled low in his chest, a sound she'd never heard from him before. Well, she's not wrong. Her hands dropped, her eyes snapping to his. Don't say that. Why not? He stepped closer again, his tone softer now. It's the truth, and I think you know it. Her chest tightened. She couldn't deny it. Not anymore. But admitting it aloud felt like stepping off a cliff. Damian, she whispered, I don't know if I can survive you a second time. His eyes softened, vulnerability piercing through the steel. Then don't survive me, he murmured. Let me love you. The words hit her like lightning. She couldn't respond. She couldn't breathe. And for the first time in years, Camille Johnson, the woman who had sworn to hate him forever, felt herself teetering on the edge of surrender. That night, long after the children were asleep, Camille lay in her borrowed bed, staring into the dark. Her lips still burned from his kiss. Her heart still raced with the memory of his words. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering to the shadows, what if he really means it? And in the silence, she realized the truth she feared most of all. She wasn't just falling for him again. She had never stopped. The city buzzed with a low, predatory hum. By the afternoon, the name Camille Johnson was splashed across every gossip blog and news ticker in Atlanta. Headlines screamed variations of the same ugly story. Blackwell air custody. Battle explodes. Billionaires abandoned children revealed. Camille Johnson, gold digger or mother of the year. A particularly vicious column from socialite Vanessa Price's favorite outlet simply read, those children don't belong in his world. The media frenzy was a living thing, a beast that camped outside Camille's apartment building. Cameras flashed like malevolent lightning as she tried to usher the shell-shocked triplets into her beat-up sedan. Camille, is it true you tricked him? Are you after his money? How much is the child support? The voices were a distorted chorus of accusation. She shielded the children with her body, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Jordan clung to her waist, sobbing. Mommy, why are they yelling at you? Her throat closed. It's okay, baby. It's okay. The words felt like ash in her mouth. She shoved them into the car, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit the key in the ignition. That evening, the final blow landed. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, stood on her welcome mat, unable to meet her eyes. Camille, look, with all this press, the building owner says you're attracting the wrong kind of attention. Paparazzi reporters, it's bad for the other tenants. Her stomach plummeted to the floor. You're kicking us out. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture of pure misery. I'm sorry, you've got 30 days. Tears pricked her eyes. 30 days. No job, no savings. 3 children. Her world, painstakingly built with grit and sacrifice, was collapsing into rubble. She didn't want to call him. Pride was a brittle shield, but it was all she had left. But the next day at the grocery store, a reporter shoved a microphone in Maya's face and Camille cracked. She dialed his number with trembling fingers. He answered on the first ring. Camille. Her voice was a frayed wire. This is your fault. Silence crackled on the line. They're calling me names, she choked out. They're scaring the children. I lost my job, my home. And now my babies are asking me why people hate me. Her voice broke, hot tears spilling onto the cheap linoleum floor. This is because of you. Damian's voice was low, a controlled detonation. Where are you? She hesitated, where the force in his tone brooked no argument. 10 minutes later, his black SUV cut through the swarm of paparazzi outside the grocery store like a shark. His security team materialized, a wall of dark suits pushing the cameras back. Damian himself strode out, his presence sucking the air from the parking lot. When Camille saw him, something primal and furious snapped inside her. She marched up her pain, igniting into pure rage. "Tell them to stop," she shouted, shoving her phone at him, the screen displaying a particularly vile headline. "Tell Vanessa or whoever's feeding this to leave me alone." He cupped her elbow, pulling her close, his voice a sharp, private hiss. "Vanessa." Her stomach twisted. "Your ex-fiancée, she's behind this." His jaw flexed. "She won't stop unless I make her." Camille yanked her arm free. "Then make her." And to her shock, he did. The next morning, Damian held a press conference on the granite steps of his corporate headquarters. The plaza was a sea of reporters, a forest of microphones and cameras. And there, smirking from the edge of the crowd in a venomous red designer dress, was Vanessa herself. Damian stood tall, a monolith of dark suit and colder resolve. He didn't flinch. He spoke into the microphone, and his voice amplified, cut through the Atlanta humidity like a blade. "The woman you've been attacking is named Camille Johnson." The crowd stilled. "She is not a gold digger. She is not a scandal. She is the mother of my children, and anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me." A wave of gasps rippled through the plaza. Vanessa's smirk faltered, then melted into disbelief. "I will not tolerate lies about her." Damian continued, his gaze sweeping the crowd, landing for a searing second on Vanessa. "She raised our children with strength and sacrifice while I was absent. That makes her worth more than any title, any fortune, any so-called pedigree." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "She is part of my family. That is the truth." The plaza exploded with shouted questions. Vanessa's face turned a satisfying shade of chalk white. Camille, watching the live stream on her phone, in her silent, threatened apartment, covered her mouth with her hands. Because for the first time, Damian Blackwell had not just defended her. He had publicly, unequivocally chosen her. That night, her phone buzzed with a different tone. Messages flooded in from neighbors, from old diner regulars, from numbers she didn't recognize. "Girl, he defended you on live TV. He called you family. Maybe he ain't so bad after all." Camille sat on her worn couch, the triplets asleep beside her, her heart a battlefield of turmoil. She hated him, resented him, feared him. But when she replayed his words, "She is part of my family," her chest tightened with something far more dangerous than anger. It was hope, fragile and terrifying. The gala was Damian's idea. Public image matters, he'd said, his voice all reason and strategy. "If people see us together, united for the children, it strengthens our case in court. It silences Vanessa. It shows stability." Camille had wanted to refuse. The very idea of stepping back into his glittering, judgmental world made her skin crawl. But the triplets, dazzled by promises of fancy clothes and endless cake, had begged with wide, excited eyes. She couldn't say no. So here she was, draped in a borrowed emerald gown that felt like someone else's skin, walking into a ballroom that dripped with gold and crystal. Cameras flashed a disorienting strobe light of scrutiny. Damian's hand was a firm, warm brand at the small of her back, the children clutching her fingers like anchors. Whispers slithered through the crowd. "That's her, the waitress with his kids. She doesn't belong here." Camille held her head high, her smile a brittle mask, but every hissed word was a tiny cut. Damian noticed. His hand pressed more firmly against her spine, his body subtly shifting to block her from the worst of the stares. "Ignore them," his voice murmured, a low rumble meant only for her. "They don't matter. They don't." Easy for him to say. For a while they managed the illusion. The children were transcendent. Maya twirled on the dance floor, her satin dress catching the light, her giggles like tiny bells. Marcus stuffed his face with canapes with a seriousness usually reserved for Lego construction. Jordan, wide-eyed, clutched Damian's hand, pointing at the glittering crystal teardrops of the chandeliers. For a few precious minutes, Camille allowed herself to believe the facade. Maybe they could get through this. But then in the shift and swell of perfumed bodies and clinking glasses, it happened. A cold dread, instant and absolute, washed over her. "Where's Jordan?" The words left her mouth not as a question, but a strangled scream. She spun, her vision tunneling, scanning the crowd. Marcus and Maya were right beside her, clutching her gown. But Jordan was gone. Her blood turned to ice. "Jordan," she cried, panic clawing its way up her throat. She shoved past tuxedos and glittering gowns, her voice raw. "Jordan." The opulent room blurred into a nightmare mosaic of strange, staring faces. She didn't care. She couldn't breathe. Damian was already moving. "Find him," he growled into his earpiece, his voice sharp, stripping away all civility. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes were wild. Security fanned out instantly, a coordinated swarm, and the entire gala ground to a horrified halt. "This is your fault," she spat at Damian, tears streaming down her face, clutching Marcus and Maya so tightly they whimpered. "If you hadn't dragged us here." Damian's jaw clenched, but he didn't waste breath arguing. His gaze swept the room like a predator's. "Stay here, don't move." And then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Minutes stretched into a terrifying eternity. Camille's knees threatened to buckle, but she locked them, refusing to fall. Every second was an agony, a vice tightening around her heart. She thought of his laugh, the way he meticulously lined up his toy cars, the way he still sneaked into her bed during thunderstorms. Her baby, her sweet, quiet boy. Please God, not him. Take anything else but not him. Maya sobbed against her hip. Marcus whimpered, "Mommy, where's Jojo?" "I'll find him," she whispered, her voice shaking so badly she barely recognized it. "Daddy's finding him right now." The word daddy felt foreign and necessary on her tongue, and in her terror she clung to it. Because right now Damian, with all his power and resources, was her only hope. Damian stormed through the service hallways of the hotel, a man possessed. Flanked by two guards, his heart hammered in a rhythm unknown in any boardroom or hostile takeover. Jordan, his son, missing. A cold, primal fear gripped him, colder than any financial loss he had ever known. He barked into his earpiece. "Lock every exit. Nobody leaves this building until I say so." They scoured the steaming kitchens, the dimly lit stairwells, the dusty storage rooms. Damian's mind conjured images. He couldn't bear small, trusting hands in the grip of a stranger, his boy's voice calling for a father who wasn't there. Not his son, not his blood. Finally, a guard's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got something. East Wing coat check." Damian sprinted, shoving doors open with a force that rattled their frames. He burst into the dim, silent coat room, and there, huddled between racks of expensive wool and fur, small and trembling, clutching a single red toy car in his fist, was Jordan. The boy's big eyes were swimming with tears. "I got lost," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to see the real cars outside." Damian dropped to his knees, the air leaving his lungs in a rush. He scooped Jordan into his arms, holding him so close he could feel the frantic rabbit beat of the boy's heart against his own. Relief so violent and profound it was almost pain crashed through him. His hand cradled the back of Jordan's head, his own chest shaking with the force of an emotion he couldn't name. "I've got you," Damian whispered, his voice rough, stripped bare of all its usual steel. "You're safe. I've got you, son." When Damian carried a trembling Jordan back into the ballroom, Camille nearly collapsed. A sob, raw and torn from the depths of her soul, escaped her throat as she lunged forward, yanking her son from Damian's arms into her own. "Oh, baby," she cried, covering his face in kisses, her tears mixing with his. "Oh, my sweet boy, don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever scare mommy like that again." Jordan clung to her, crying into the neck of her emerald gown. "I didn't know where you were." She rocked him, murmuring nonsense, relief flooding every cell, leaving her weak and trembling. When she finally looked up, Damian was watching her, his own chest rising and falling unevenly. The controlled mask was gone. In its place was something raw, unguarded, and terrifyingly vulnerable. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other over their child's head. Two enemies, two warriors bound together by a fear that had nearly shattered them both. Finally, Damian spoke, his voice low and graveled with spent adrenaline. "He's safe. That's all that matters." Camille could only nod, her voice stolen by the aftermath of terror and the shocking sight of Damian Blackwell undone. The gala ended in chaos, but Damian's security carved a path through the clamoring press. He escorted her and the children to the waiting car, his hand a steadying pressure on her back. Inside the silent, luxurious interior, the triplets huddled together, exhausted and shaken. Camille sat with them, stroking hair, whispering comforts, her own body still vibrating with panic. Damian sat across from them, silent, his gaze fixed on the children, as if he couldn't bear to look away. Finally, Camille lifted her eyes to him. "Thank you," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "Don't thank me." But the words lacked their usual ice. They were just quiet. That night, long after the children had fallen asleep in a tangled pile in the center of her bed, Camille sat alone in the dark, trembling. She replayed the night on a loop, the terror, the desperation, the image of Damian on his knees in that closet, holding their son with a tenderness that had cracked the world open. She thought of his voice rough with emotion, calling Jordan's son. And for one terrible, beautiful moment, she had felt it, not like enemies, not like opponents, but like a family. Her heart ached. Her mind screamed to resist to rebuild the walls. But deep inside, Camille knew a devastating truth. She was losing the battle. Not in the courtroom, not in the eyes of the public, but in the deepest, most guarded chamber of her own heart. Of course, I will rewrite the script for Act 5 based on your detailed instructions. Here is the enhanced version. Act 5, the new world expanded. The city buzzed with a strange electric anticipation. By the afternoon, the name Camille Vance was splashed across every digital newsstand. Headlines screamed, Blackwell Vance custody war erupts. Billionaire's hidden heirs revealed. Camille Vance gold digger or saintly mother. The media frenzy was a living beast, its hunger insatiable. Photographers staked out her building like vultures. Gossip blogs twisted her past into a grotesque caricature. Even her old friends from the diner had gone silent, their numbers disappearing from her phone, unsure how to stand beside a woman caught in such a public firestorm. But the only thing that truly shattered Camille was a moment of pure, innocent dread. The night before, as she tucked a sleepy Marcus into bed, his small voice had whispered into the dark, Mommy, if Daddy decides we're too much trouble, do we go back to being just us again? She had choked back a sob, kissing his forehead, her voice a fragile promise. He wants you, baby. Daddy wants you so much. But the unspoken question echoed in her own heart. Did he want her? The answer arrived the next morning, not with a phone call, but with the man himself. Damian stood at her door, not in a sleek suit, but in a simple dark charcoal coat, his jaw set with a terrifying determination. The usual entourage was conspicuously absent. Come with me, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Her eyes narrowed. To where? You'll see. Before she could form a protest, the children's joyous cries filled the hallway. Daddy! They swarmed him, a tangle of small limbs and bright smiles. He gathered them effortlessly into his arms, his stern expression melting into something so tender it made Camille's chest ache. Get dressed, he instructed her quietly over their heads. All of you. Against every instinct screaming at her to slam the door, she obeyed. Something in his tone, a raw vulnerability beneath the command, told her this wasn't about corporate power plays. This was about them. An hour later, Camille found herself walking back into the grand ballroom of the Peachtree Plaza, the very place where her world had nearly ended weeks ago. But now, instead of glittering socialites, the cavernous room was a sea of glaring camera lights and shouting journalists. Her stomach plummeted. Damian, what is this? He placed a steady grounding hand at the small of her back. The truth. Before she could demand answers, Damian strode onto the central stage. Flashbulbs erupted like a violent storm, journalists shouting over one another. Mr. Blackwell, confirm the triplets are yours. Are you abandoning your company for a waitress? Is Camille Vance your mistress? Damian raised a hand. A hush fell heavy and expectant. His voice, when it came, was not the cold, clipped tone of a CEO, but something deeper, rougher, carved from regret. 4 years ago, he began, the words echoing in the silent room. I made the worst mistake of my life. I turned my back on something priceless, my own blood. His gaze swept the crowd before locking directly onto Camille, pinning her in place. Camille Vance gave me 3 miracles, Maya, Marcus, and Jordan. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. Camille stood frozen, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. For years, Damian continued, his voice gaining strength. She raised them alone, without my help, without my name, without the empire I could have offered. And she raised them beautifully. They are smart. They are brave. They are kind. They are mine. And they are hers. Tears, hot and unbidden, blurred Camille's vision. From this day forward, he thundered, I will never let them doubt who they belong to. I will never let anyone question the worth of their mother. Camille Vance is not a gold digger. She is not a scandal. She is the strongest woman I have ever known. He paused, the silence absolute. And she is the only woman I have ever loved. The ballroom exploded. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted, a cacophony of noise. But Camille heard none of it. Her world had shrunk to the man on the stage, and the 5 words echoing in her soul, the only woman I have ever loved. Damian extended his hand toward her. Her knees trembled as she walked forward, the triplets clutching her hands, their small faces alight with confusion and excitement. When she reached him, he pulled her up onto the stage, his arm a solid possessive band around her waist. "This," he declared to the roaring room, "is my family, and nothing and no one will ever take them from me." She turned to him, her lips trembling, words failing her. "I meant it," he said, his voice dropping, meant for her ears alone. "I love you, Camille. I think I loved you from the moment I saw you at that gala all those years ago. I was too much of a coward to admit it to myself or to you, but not anymore. Never again." And before the crowd, before the world, Damian Blackwell bent his head and kissed her. It wasn't a claim of ownership, but a vow, a promise sealed in front of millions. Camille melted into him, her hands fisting in the wool of his coat, her body trembling, not from fear, but from a seismic shift within her. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was seen. She was chosen. She was loved. Of course, the peace was shattered. Vanessa Price stormed into the ballroom like an avenging angel, her designer heels striking the marble like gunshots. "This is a circus, Damian," she shrieked, her composure vaporized by rage. "You can't seriously chain yourself to her. She's beneath you. Those children don't belong in your world." The camera swiveled, hungry for blood. Damian's eyes narrowed to slits, his arm tightening around Camille. "Say one more word about them," he said, his voice dropping to a lethal, icy calm that was more terrifying than any shout. "One more word, Vanessa and I will dismantle your father's company and your reputation piece by piece until there's nothing left. These children are my world." And Vanessa spat, pointing a manicured finger at Camille. His gaze softened as he looked down at the woman in his arms, but his voice remained unyielding. "Camille is my heart. That means she outranks every investor, every contract, and it certainly means she outranks you." Vanessa's face drained of all color. For the first time, she had no retort, no clever barb. Humiliation washed over her features. She turned on her heel and fled, the whispers of the crowd chasing her out. After the reporters were finally pushed back and order restored, Damian led his family outside into the cool Atlanta evening. The triplets buzzed with exhilaration. "Did you see Mommy Daddy told everyone we're his?" Maya squealed. "And he kissed you," Marcus added, grinning impishly. Jordan, ever the quiet observer, tugged on Camille's hand, his big eyes serious. "Does that mean we're a real family now?" Camille's throat tightened. She looked up at Damian. His expression was stripped bare, no arrogance, no billionaire's mask. Just a man hopeful and terrified, standing in the wreckage of his own making, offering her his heart. "Yes," he answered, his hand covering hers and his thumb stroking her knuckles. "We're a family, forever." Camille's tears spilled over then, but she was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years. She finally allowed herself to believe it. The fight was over. The war was won. For the first time, she was truly home.